portion of the CFA. We do request that you do not use AI during this webinar. And we do have a lengthy agenda today that covers 3 slides, so I will not go over every item. And we will get started with some updates and reminders for the FY27 CFA. Just remember that there are different portions of the CFA that connect and need to have consistency. I will use the parent involvement as an example, making sure that all your budget narratives are clear, that it is parent and family engagement, in addition to having the correct tag, so it then aligns to the district set-aside page where you answer questions that correlate with the budget narratives, and then making sure on the PPA page for the parent and family engagement that you have the correct amount of money spiraled to the schools for their portion. And with your personnel FTEs, making sure what you have in those budget narratives align exactly to the personnel charts. And with the budget tags and narratives, budget tags help you identify the purpose of a budget item, and you can use a filtering tool, or we have a page if you want to see the overall amount. You do assign one budget tag to a line item. There is an exception I will go over in the next few slides. And there is that filtering tool that will help you. And these are the budget tags required for Title I Part A, Part C, Title II Part A, and Title III Part A. There have been no changes, but all of those that you see on your screen are required. And then with Title V and Title IV, there are no changes again this year, so the same ones are utilized. Do note the exception is under Title IV, so if you have a private school, you would need to tag that. In addition, you would tag the area that they are utilizing the funds for. So you might have private school and well-rounded together, but that is the only exception is for the private schools under Title IV. There is a budget tag summary page that was added last year, and that helps you see the overall amounts to ensure that they align with what you have with your own data. And when you're looking at your budget, ensure that the expenditures that they are reasonable, meaning that they're not excessive in cost and it's what would normally cost someone, that they are necessary for carrying out the grant program, making sure also with the necessary that it aligns to either the district plan or the school plan, depending on the grant, and ensure it is allocable, meaning is it for the benefit of the grant? Does it meet that program's intent and objectives? And when you're typing out your budget narratives, when it comes to staff, we do ask that you do not include names, either in any of those 3 sections. But when it comes to the position titles and your FTEs, whatever you have on the personnel details page must align perfectly to what is in your budget narratives. And if you update those 2, if you put the same FTE amounts on, say, a program details pages or any uploads, you will also need to adjust that. The overview page, this was added last year as an informational page that lets you see the workflow of your CFA along with any contacts and resources you may need at the TDOE level. And the contacts page. This is a critical page for us because the roles you put in here are where we download that and send emails out. And if you have 2 people, such as you have a new ESSA director and the other ESSA director is staying on for a year, place both of those in there. And also note the experience is within the state of Tennessee, not just that specific district. With your testing dates and that information where you all have to place that on your website each year, this is the information that is needed. Nothing has changed on what is required on your website. The testing dates have not been released, but do note that this page will not open until July. However, it has to be completed by July 31st. You do not have to submit by July 31st, but there is a timestamp in ePlan that will demonstrate completion. And the IDA coordinator team is the one who reviews this page. With the allocation section, there's a lot of transferability allowed under the ESSA portion of the CFA, and we went ahead and topped out all the ones and where they can transfer to. Do note, once you transfer funds, say for example, you take Title II to transfer into Title I, all those Title II funds take on the identity of Title I. And this page is also where you will complete the school-wide pool. The exception is Title I and Con Admin. When you are adding Con Admin on the allocation section page for those that utilize it, you are having to be within the constraints of 2% for Title III and Title IV and 20% for the other grants. And this is an example of how it looks when you're transferring funds. So we will say we are transferring our Title IV funds into Title I, since we are going to be having preliminary allocations and eventually original. You will transfer all of your Title IV into Title I on the original. Once the FER is completed and you want to transfer your Title IV carryover, you would place that in the carryover line item. And then also on this page is where you will see the school-wide pool and Con Admin. With the ESSA requirements section, there is a new page to this, and it is the ESSA evidence that was embedded in Inform Tennessee. It is now going to be part of the CFA. You will need to answer your tiers of evidence along with how you determined that, and a few other questions. And then also within the ESSA requirements section, there are your administrative limits, whether you take Con Admin or you take direct admin. And in addition, it also has your indirect cost as well. Do note, I want to take a reminder, this page shows all the requirements with the 20% column from Title I all the way down to Title V. That 20%, whether you're taking direct or Con Admin, you also have to include your indirect cost within that 20% cap. However, with your Title III and Title IV, you have 2% of direct or Con Admin cost, and then you can take the rest of the indirect cost. And then for your general ESSA admin, for those that utilize Con Admin, once that section has been added, you will need to answer questions, and we do request that you include all of your responsibilities for administrating the programs. And if you're not full-time under Con Admin, put the other funding sources of what you're not paid for. And every program details page within the CFA, the first thing it asks is if you're using Con Admin. If you are, you just check that box and move on. And if you are not, you will have to answer a few more questions about how the grant is being administered. With Title I Part A, the program details page, we ask that you ensure what you have in the budget supplemental-wise, that you check that on this page because it helps us with running reports and seeing that. And then your coordination of funds and services, and select all that are applicable. Do note, if you do transfer all of funds, ESSA funds, into another grant, say for example, use the Title IV into Title I, you would not select Title IV because that has now taken on the identity of Title I. And once again, with the district planning going to every 3 years, we have revised the Title I Part A parent family engagement questions to align to what was in Inform Tennessee last year. And you will have to answer those now within the Title I section of the CFA on the program details page. Same again for the needs assessment. These questions were in the district plan last year. And so these are not new. It's just now they are embedded in the CFA. With your Title I Part A personnel details with regards to the regular school year, you have a few options. There's not a chart shown here, but below this document upload, there's a chart that has teachers, assistants, and certain staff pre-populated, and then it has some columns for you to add staff titles. If your LEA is small enough, you can complete that chart, or for those that are larger and have multiple roles, there is this Excel template, and you will simply download that, complete the FTE and the staff titles to where it tells the schools. It has totals to where they can be easily known what the total FTE is to align with the budget narrative. And after you upload that, there is on the right, if you scroll to the right of the chart towards the end, you will have to include headcount and FTE as well for what is embedded in the Excel sheet. Your within district allocations information. With your poverty source data, which we'll go over a little bit more, the options, do note LEAs have the autonomy to choose the month and year and the data that they want to have for their poverty source. However, note, once the CFA has had original approval by the Tennessee Department of Education, it cannot be changed. However, under ESSA, there are exceptions for new or significantly expanded charter schools. Now with your low income data sources, the LEAs have the autonomy to choose one of these, or you can choose as many as you want that seems applicable without the household survey there to identify how you are going to rank and serve your schools. Do note, when you utilize a combo of those, you will need to remove your duplicates. And do select all the methods you will utilize. For example, free and reduced price lunch. Most LEAs also have the direct certification data embedded with the free and reduced price lunch. So even though free and reduced price lunch would be your primary source, the direct certification also needs to be selected as well. If you choose to just have free students only, and you have removed, for example, say you're a CEP school and you've removed all the Medicaid reduced, you are then allowed to use the multiplier. And I will go over that in just a second. First, let's talk about the low income data evidence that you will need to upload where you work with your school nutrition department. We need a way to identify students, such as a student ID number through your student information system, or maybe there's a different student ID number with the school nutrition. However, we do not want any personally identifiable information. All of that needs to be removed. The school they attend, that can be a school number or name, the grade level of the student, and of course the type of eligibility, such as TANF, Medicaid free, and Medicaid reduced. Note, if you guys use different ways to code these, let's say, for example, Medicaid reduced has a code of Z within your LEA, we will need a legend stating that Z means Medicaid reduced, because if you are using the multiplier, you cannot have any reduced students within that report that you are utilizing. So if you're using direct certification list, remember Medicaid reduced has to be removed in order to use the multiplier. And if you have free or reduced price lunch students and you're also using the direct cert, you have the autonomy to remove all of those reduced students and use the multiplier. But the multiplier is used as a way to account for reduced students, considering it's only free students that are accounted for in the count. And that was completed by US Ed and USDA when the CEP came out. Once you've decided the poverty sources and you've determined the month and year that must be consistent, then you decide if you want to district-wide rank your schools, which means you just go in order of the poverty percentage without regard to grade span, or you can choose to grade span your schools. And the LEA has the autonomy based on the needs of what grade span goes first. Of course, if you have fewer than 1,000 students or a single attendance area, the ranking and allocation rules do not apply on that, and you can move forward with different methods there. The 35% rule, you select that if you have any schools that fall below 40%. You also, if you are doing district-wide ranking, you can only use district-wide poverty average, and that's the average of all the Title I schools within your LEA. However, if you grade span rank, you can either grade span average or you can district-wide poverty average based on what you feel works best for the needs of each school. Do note if any school goes over or at 75%, you must serve those schools. And even if your grade span ranking and you have never served a high school, if it goes over 75%, you still have to serve those. If an LEA wants to, they can prioritize any high school that is 50% or more. Of course, that would be second after schools over 75%. And if you have any schools that go below 40%, you can request a waiver. And I do have some information on, I think, the best method to utilize for schools that have fallen below 40% the first year. The first year a school falls below 40%, LEAs have the ability to grandfather them in for the first year only. However, if you want to, you can go ahead and request a waiver. But if you grandfather it in the first year and then the following year it is still below 40%, you must get a waiver. Also, when you're looking at what schools to serve, think about appropriate funding levels. You cannot give any school less than $100 per pupil amount. And you don't want to just keep giving money to schools, just say, oh, they need some money. Ensure that the money they get would be beneficial to run a strong Title I program for the students. And also note, as you are spiraling, you cannot have more than $50 remaining on column G of the PPA page. Sometimes schools fall below 35%. And then when that happens, if an LEA chooses to still serve the school, they have to have a minimum PPA, which is 125% of the average district PPA. And every school, except for the last one served, must receive that 125% PPA. And that auto-populates on both the allocation designation page, and anyone that has a school that falls below 35%, you'll see that 1.25 there. And then once that PPA has been calculated on the allocation designation page, it rolls over to the PPA page. And this is a high-level overview of everything we just went over, so you can have access to it on one slide. Students experiencing homelessness. LEAs are required to have a homeless set-aside. And you have to make sure you have sufficient funds to serve those students. And here are some allowable, although it's not an exhaustive list, of expenditures that you can utilize with a homeless set-aside. And there are a few questions you will have to answer. And if you do not have a large homeless set-aside, but you have an extreme amount of homeless students, do explain the why. Like you have a lot of community-based organizations. You have someone within the community who goes ahead and donates a large sum of money each year. Whatever the rationale is, place that in there. And also with the transportation services, tell all the available options that you have for homeless students within your district. And then there will be a part that pre-populates information. based on what you have tagged, and data from February 2026 for students coded as H. And do note, this is an exception when it comes to a district set-aside. This can be used for all students within the district, not just Title I schools. This is one exception to the district set-aside page. And you will have to provide your homeless liaison headcount and FTE. And do note that this position can be supported by your Title I Part A set-aside, or it can be under general purpose. And any other position that might be also assisting with homeless students, you need to add those as well. Let's say, for example, you're a school system with 3 schools, and the 3 guidance counselors at each of the schools are tasked with admitting homeless, ensuring they're on track to progress, ensuring that their needs are met. And so let's say that takes up 1/10 of their time throughout the year. You would put a head count of 3, position name, guidance counselor, and then if you have determined that about 1/10 of the year, that is what their duties is, you would put 0.3, because it would be 3 times 0.1. And then if you have any other McKinney-Vento grants or anything else, please check that as applicable. And here's the contact information. With students in foster care, ensure you put the foster care point of contact in the LEA address book, even if you do not have any foster care students. And you will need to enter the total number of foster care students enrolled and the total number of bid meetings you have had. We do realize that the school year has not completed yet, so you indicate that number that you have at the moment you are completing the CFA. And this is a little bit of how it looks like to help you out. And also there are some auto-populated fields. The transportation agreements. These are in previous CFAs. If nothing needs to change, even if it's an old director of school's name, if the agreement is still valid, you can upload the one from last year. And these are the resources for foster care students. And with your district set-asides, there are some required set-asides, and some of them are optional based on the needs of all the Title I schools. With the exception of homeless, the intent of the Title I Part A district set-asides is for your Title I schools only. On the required set-asides, you do have to have homeless. If you have any private schools that also accept Title I funds, you would have that is required, and any LEA receiving 500,000 or more must reserve, and it will auto-populate the parent and family engagement amount. And this is a slide of all the other allowable district set-asides. And remember, these are for your Title I schools only. And with the required parent and family engagement, you do have a few more constraints that we need to go over. 90% of those funds must be distributed to the Title I schools. And this is your private and public family engagement. That 90% will be displayed of what you must give to the school, and 10% can be held at the LEA level. There is an exception that if you have a person in the CFA that handles all the parent and family engagement for the schools, what you would simply need to do is have each principal sign off that this person is responsible for parent family engagement at the LEA level, and they will be the ones handling all the funds. And you would upload that. You do have a few questions you will have to ask or answer with regards to the parent and family engagement. And with related documents, anything that you upload in another part of Title I of the CFA also links here. So if you want to wait and upload all your documents on this, the pages will link. With your Title I Part A neglected, do note nothing has changed. However, do not forget to update your needs assessment and your MOU. And here are your resources, and Leslie Watson is your contact. With your Title I Part C migrant, for those that accept these funds, you will notice there are less questions to answer this year on the program details pages. There are still some that auto-populate with your Category 1 and 2, your priority for services, and you will have to answer how you will provide that support for your priority for service students, but notice also just your non-priority for service migrant students. And of course, how you manage your migrant data, you will need to answer those questions. They are nothing new. And then with the programming, remember within the budget to have your regular school year or summer services tag and answer the questions that are applicable to those areas. And do remember when you are budgeting that you not only have to have supplemental instructional services, but a little bit of support services as well. And of course, anything that is in the grant, you need to make sure you answer thoroughly on the program details pages. And there are certain ones on the program details pages that even if they are not in the budget, they still require an answer on how you're supporting your migrant students. And if you do have anyone staff-wise within the Title I Part C budget for migrant, you will need to upload their job description. And here are the resources. With your Title I Part D, no changes again. Just remember to update that needs assessment and the MOU. And if you have any questions, Leslie Watson is your contact. Juvenile justice, just always want to keep this slide here to remind everyone you must have a point of contact in the address book. And even if you do not have a high school, you are still required to have that point of contact. With Title II Part A, minimal changes this year. One thing before we get started on the changes is do remember with Title II Part A that this does align to your needs assessment with your district planning. And these are some revised questions that came from Inform Tennessee, and they have been removed to be placed in the CFA. A little reminder, or maybe for someone who is a newer or a brand new ESSA Federal Programs Director, when it comes to professional development for Title II, this is only for your school level staff. And we have a few examples there of teachers, principals, other school leaders, and parapros. Do you also know instructional coaches at the school level, your assistant principal at the school level, your librarian at the school level? Those can also be included. They are school-based staff. And something to remember, if there is a conference that is one time, ESSA has a definition for professional development that it must be long-term and not short or one day or standalone. So there also needs to be a plan of what happens after the conference in order to keep with the professional development definition for ESSA. And if you want to upload a supporting document, you can. And here are some resources. And moving on to your English learner requirements, there is an English learner requirements program details pages. Regardless if you receive Title III funding, you must complete this page. And you will answer your staffing, your certified teachers, how you identify and enroll, the type of language instruction that you all utilize within your district, and how you're providing equitable access for all students. As a reminder, the staff ratio is still 1 to 35, and that is based on last year's October 1 count. And if you are not within that 1 to 35 ratio, please provide the why and how you will be by September 15th, 2026. And a little reminder about Title III is this supplement and supplant goes above and beyond state and local. It is also federal level. And when it comes to translation and interpretation, there is guidance where most of it has to be paid for with general purpose funds. And before adding anything to Title III, ensure you either read the link within this webinar or contact Hannah Gribble or your ESSA divisional coordinator. Do remember that your Title III budget is only for your ELs and any immigrants that may be served under Title III. For those who are part of a consortia, you will need to check if you were part of one who you participated with last year. And those who accept the Title III funds, they must also complete this Title III program details page. And this is where you'll describe how everything is supplemental and ensure when you're answering the question about to measure the impact of Title III that you do take into account your Title III self-assessment you complete every year. Also, if you do choose to accept Title III funds, you have to describe how you're going to implement parent and family and community engagement activities for your English learner students. And that also correlates with the PD as well, to where you would check D&E that they are being implemented within the school year for your English language learners and the staff. Here are a few resources. And then the Title III Part A budget. These are for those that receive 10,000 or more, or you are the consortia lead, so you're standalone. So do ensure when you complete this budget, as you would with the consortia budget, that you provide enough budget description to where we know it is truly supplemental and not supplanting. Title IV Part A, there are no changes this year. Just a reminder that if you have 30,000 or more, you conduct a needs assessment, which is completed through the district plan, and that there is a requirement you spend at least 20% on well-rounded and 20% on safe and healthy, with at least 1% on effective use of technology. And the effective use of technology under this grant is professional development based in order to grow your staff with the technology they need to help students. And there is an infrastructure rule that is different from the definition of most infrastructure that we see. A computer, a laptop, a mouse, a tablet, a screen, all of those, whether it be a software application, those are considered infrastructure under Title IV. So within the 1%, if you spend some money on professional development of that 1%, then based on that amount, you can't spend more than 15% on infrastructure. And then on the Title IV program details page, you just state how you did consult and ensuring for each focus area with a well-rounded, safe and healthy and technology that you answered the 4 boxes that you see under each one thoroughly. And remember, with the budget tags, there is the exception with the private school. In addition, let's say you're utilizing 72210 with the line item 524 for your staff development. What you would need to do if you have put both your well-rounded and safe and healthy together, you do not place 2 tags. You would simply have 2 line items and separate the PD amounts that align to well-rounded and the PD amount that aligns to safe and healthy. And these are the assurances that you will need to read and accept. And then a carryover reminder that if you did not spend the required amount on those 3 areas, let's say you only spent 19% for well-rounded education this year, that means next year when the carryover comes in, you have to remember to spend at least 1% of that. So making sure you are tracking the funds. Your Title IV resources. And Title V, Part B, Subpart 2, there are 2 federal program Title V grants. You have the Small Rural School Achievement, which is administered by the U.S. Department of Education for those who qualify for that. And then you have your Rural and Low Income Schools, RLIS, and we are the flow-through at TDOE. You can qualify for both, but you only can participate in one. So at the top of this program details page, it has been revised that if you want to accept RLIS over SRSA, please do that. If you are eligible for both, select the one you are going to utilize. And then just a reminder, there's no changes from last year, that just whatever you tagged in the budget, depending on the ESSA grant area it aligns with, that you answer the questions within each one of those. And then like Title III, Title V has a supplement not supplant of also not just state and local, but federal as well. And if you want to upload any related documents, you can. And here are some resources to utilize. And then class size reduction. If you choose with either your Title I, II, or those who receive 5 funds to have a class size reduction teacher, which means that this teacher goes above what is required in Tennessee of the state average. So if it's a 1 to 25, you would not have a teacher if you were 1 to 29 to make that class size smaller. This is someone to where you're already within the ratio and you're trying to make even a smaller class size within ratio. And you will need to add the information to the chart if you do choose to have a class size reduction teacher. You will also have to answer some questions. At the moment, there has only been one effective survey or study, and that is the STARS study in Tennessee, that has shown effectiveness in class sizes K through 3. Do note, if you are using class size reduction teachers, that after September, you will need to not only have what you have as your kind of guessing based on historical information of how many students you will have in the grade spans, but you need to actually true it up to the actual after September. Also, the class size reduction teacher needs to be in the certification area that they are teaching in, and they're not teaching on a waiver. They've at least met a level 3 or above on the team evaluation. And you will upload that in the LEA document library by October 1st. Equitable services for your private schools. The E-Plan populates on the private schools page the summary of the results from your non-public survey that you have already submitted for this year. However, note for Title 1A, even though you did complete that on the survey, you have to complete the school eligibility page in order for the program details page to populate. And these are the program details pages where you will answer questions regarding the private school. And this is just a breakdown of how it looks on the right-hand side with a screenshot. And if you do not have any private schools or the private schools in your area decided not to participate, please remember to put NA for those sections. So if you're a school system and you do not have any private schools that have decided to participate, NA all of those pages. Also ensure that you upload the affirmation of meaningful private school consultation. That one is required for CFA approval. However, if you've already completed the consultation and the final agreement, that works as well. But for those who only have the affirmation of meaningful private school consultation, you will then have to upload the final agreements by September the 15th. And there is an Equitable Services Toolkit that was revised not long ago. And then some other information to assist with the CFA. When you are looking at the CFA and allowability, there is a federal spending handbook. That's kind of the what is the intent of each grant? What are some examples of allowable purchases as long as they're based on the needs assessment? And then your consolidated funding application guide. That is your how-to. You can take that guide and go step by step to complete the CFA. And do note, there are more now added to this resource section, but within the CFA reference documents, this is where you'll find all the FY27 CFA materials. And here is your divisional coordinator map on who you need to contact. And if you need to contact your finance consultant, here's a copy of it. And other ESSA points of contact, kind of use this as a little cheat sheet of everything that's been on previous slides, so it's all together in one. And remember that the CFA opened March the 1st. It is due May the 1st, and you must have all CFA approved by the department by July 1st. And also note that keeps your money flowing. So if, for some example, there was some unforeseen condition and you couldn't get approval until July 10th, you can't purchase anything until you get full TDOE approval. And that is for any revision as well. Thank you for listening to this webinar. I'll pause for feedback. And here is the hotline number and website if you know of any fraud, waste, or abuse that you must report.